Welcome to buying pre-construction condominiums. Let's get started. We'll start by presenting the differences between resale and pre-construction condos. We'll also examine the limitations associated with pre-construction purchases, including delays, cancellations, and material changes, review documentation for pre-construction condo purchases, discuss advice that you can provide buyer clients seeking pre-construction condos, and present steps you can follow when the scope of the transaction is beyond your expertise. Matthew meets with a new client, Lydia, who just graduated from university and wants to buy a condo soon. Review their conversation before advancing. Now that you've reviewed their conversation, click Next to review Matthew's explanation of the difference between resale condos, pre-construction condos, and residential condo conversions. Let's review Matthew's explanation of the options Lydia has for purchasing a condo. We'll start with resale condos. When a buyer purchases a resale condo, it means they are typically working with a real estate salesperson during the trade who represents them as clients or provides services to them as customers. They are purchasing what they see. They can walk through and experience the actual space they may end up living in, including any finishes or upgrades. They are buying an existing operating entity. The offer is submitted using an APS. There may be a conditional offer period if the buyer and seller agree to it in the APS. Financing may be more challenging to arrange if there are commercial units in the project. For example, a buyer may not be able to insure the mortgage through CMHC if the project contains ground floor commercial units, a hotel component, or even live-work units. In such cases, the buyer may have to seek another insurer or provide a deposit of 20% or higher. The move-in date is specific. They become the owner of the unit on the closing date. There may be limited or no Tarion warranty remaining if the purchase occurs within the first 7 years that the unit was built. Tarion's website explains, for example, that the 7-year warranty starts on the date the original buyer took possession and ends on the 7th anniversary of that date. Please contact Tarion for definitive information on warranty coverage. They can resell at any time after they gain ownership. There may be tax implications, so advise the buyer-client to seek expert advice. The buyer may face limitations or prohibitions from the condo corporation to rent out the unit, either short or long-term. When a buyer purchases a pre-construction condo, they are buying off paper without seeing the actual home and making decisions based on documents like renderings, floor plans, and the builder's proposed declaration, all provided by the builder. They are buying based on the reputation of the builder and their past experience and ability to deliver what they promise. It is the buyer's choice to work with a real estate representative. The builder may or may not offer compensation for real estate salespersons working with buyers. You must find out what the builder's compensation is, a finder's fee, a percentage, or another arrangement, and inform the buyer accordingly. The offer process may be more concise and may seem different to the offer process for resale properties. You can bring value to a buyer-client's experience by advising them and helping them negotiate items in the APS that protect their best interests. The buyer has a 10-day review period, often referred to as a cooling-off period after signing the APS, where they can cancel the deal with no questions asked. This applies to condo homes only, not to freehold homes. Also, consider that for pre-construction condos, the builder has the discretion to make changes to the APS. The buyer can often choose finishes and upgrades. There are limitations on assignments, the ability to sell the deal to someone else, up to final closing. However, you may be able to negotiate your buyer-client's right to assign to protect them from lifestyle and market changes during what are often years-long construction periods. If eligible, Tarion provides protection for the unit's 1, 2, and 7-year warranty. The estimated move-in date is subject to change. For example, there may be delays in construction. Occupancy does not equal ownership. Buyers of new condos do not officially own their unit until the condo is registered, becomes a corporation, and the title or ownership is transferred from the builder to the buyer. However, the buyer often takes occupancy before the condo has been registered. This means there's a gap between occupancy and ownership. During this time, known as interim occupancy, the unit buyer pays occupancy fees, which may include monthly interest on the purchase price balance, monthly condo fees, and property taxes. During interim occupancy, the buyer may not be able to rent or resell during that time. There are also financing and tax considerations for pre-construction condo buyers. For example, pre-construction financing is somewhat different than when buying resale units. For one, a builder may require a substantial deposit of up to 25% of the condo price, often spread over several deposit payments. This deposit is often far greater than the minimum down payment for a resale property. Note that payment schedules may be negotiated with the builder. Buyers may be reaching out to lenders at least twice, first during the 10-day cooling-off period for an initial pre-approval, and then again before closing. The initial pre-approval is meant to satisfy the builder on your creditworthiness. The latter is a final approval meant to help you close the deal and assume full ownership. In some cases, a significant amount of time may have passed between the time when the buyer first purchases the unit and the time of the final closing, and there may be changes to mortgage requirements or interest rates which could affect how much condo the buyer can afford. Advise your buyer clients to speak with an experienced lender. Financing may be more challenging if there are commercial units in the condo project. There may be tax implications, HST or income tax, for example, if the buyer does not occupy the unit. Advise the buyer to consult with a tax or legal expert. Refer to the course resources for additional information for condo buyers. A residential condo conversion is when an existing non-residential building, like a church or a former factory, is converted into residential condominiums. Many of the pre-existing building elements, such as the facade or foundation, are integrated into the project. Purchasing a pre-construction condo conversion unit is like buying a pre-construction condo unit with some major differences. Statutory warranties protected by Tarion only apply to projects where the first APS, the first purchaser who bought into the project, was signed on or after January 1, 2018. Condo conversions benefit from the same 1, 3, and 7-year warranty, deposit protection, and delayed closing coverage as other new homes, with one exception. There is no first-year work and materials warranty on the pre-existing elements. This exception is because the pre-existing elements, such as decorative beams or archways, may have been built to different standards and, over time, may have been subjected to cosmetic defects. All other one-year warranty protections, including that the home meets Ontario Building Code regulations, would apply to both the pre-existing elements and new components of a condo conversion. We'll be going into more detail about this topic in the Carry-On unit of this update course. And to learn more about condos, we encourage you to take the Residential Condominiums elective in the MCE site. It's one of our most highly subscribed courses. After Matthew's explanation, Lydia states that she wants to buy a pre-construction unit. Review their conversation by clicking the arrows to toggle between scenes. Then, click Next to answer a question about the scenario. Other than location, what are some of the other factors Lydia should consider? Thank you for your input. Lydia should be considering the type of condo she wants, the type of warranty coverage available for condos, and how the deposit structure would work. The commission or compensation the builder pays to her real estate salesperson should not be a factor in determining her decision to buy, but she should be aware of any compensation arrangements in place. Matthew does his due diligence and reviews the different types of condos with his client Lydia. He explains Carry-On's warranty coverage, including what's covered in each stage of the warranty, as well as the types of homes and elements that are covered, and which ones are not. He also explains to Lydia about compensation from the builder. Read their dialogue and click Next to answer a related question. What advantages of working with a real estate salesperson might Matthew share with Lydia to help her make an informed decision? Thank you for your input. As part of his value add, Matthew should explain to Lydia, his client, that if she works with a real estate salesperson like himself, he is responsible for protecting her best interests. He will flag potential risks and limitations, stay on top of the project, advocate for her choices while providing her with guidance and insight along the way. Click Next to read more. Working with a real estate representative means that Lydia will have Matthew looking out for her best interests and negotiating on her behalf. For example, since pre-construction buyers are often buying from a piece of paper and basing their purchase on a builder's reputation, Matthew can suggest visiting a builder's past projects so Lydia can appreciate the physical spaces, finishes, and get a sense of what her own community will look like once built. Matthew's job is to help her to identify her needs and to help her buy a unit that meets those needs, and then advocate for her interests while negotiating the APS. He is also responsible for identifying potential risks and limitations and advising her on the best course of action. Matthew explains to Lydia that once she signs an APS with the builder, she has a unique, no questions asked, 10-day review period that is only available to pre-construction condo buyers who purchase directly from the builder. It is often referred to as the cooling-off period. This is a unique opportunity for Lydia and experts such as a lawyer or mortgage professional to review the APS and disclosure statement documents and to cancel the deal if she changes her mind. This is the only time she may cancel the deal with no questions asked. Matthew will provide support by providing referrals to qualified experts experienced with pre-construction transactions. This way, Lydia can become fully informed during the cooling-off period on what she is getting into and the potential benefits and limitations of the purchase. Lydia asks Matthew to tell her more about the limitations of buying pre-construction condos. Review their conversation by clicking the arrows to toggle between scenes. When done, click Next to answer a question about the scenario. The conversation continues between Matthew and Lydia. What other limitations might Matthew share with Lydia? Thank you for your input. Matthew must explain the limitations of the project being delayed, canceled, changes in lending rates, changes to the size or layout of the unit, and increases in condo fees, based on increases disclosed in the first-year budget. These are all key issues that must be on your radar as well. But it is not enough to say, in passing, that there may be increases in lending rates or that condo fees may be higher than projected. There are many instances where low condo fees increase after the first or second year, so sit down and have a focused conversation with your buyer client about what these increases mean and their impact on the purchase and ownership experience. Matthew discusses these and other limitations with Lydia, providing insight on potential financing challenges like changes to the terms of the mortgage. For example, if she qualifies now but the closing date is years away, would she still qualify for mortgage financing then? He also explains that in certain cases, financing may be challenging if a condo project includes commercial units. Lydia also needs to consider changes in lifestyle from purchase to occupancy. Her employment and income can change, or she may have additional expenses like a car or dependents. In addition to all this, there could also be fluctuations in the market. Matthew suggests Lydia conduct her own type of stress test for her financial situation to see what she'll be able to manage if any of the above changes to her current financial situations occur. This way, she can still cover any fees and adjustments on closing. This is a lot to take in, but he assures her that he is there to guide her in the transaction and urges her to consult with mortgage professionals and other experts, like real estate lawyers who are experienced in condo deals. Matthew also explains the risk that the builder could go bankrupt, in which case the condo project could be canceled. Lydia is especially concerned about condo cancellations because she's seen several news stories about this recently. She asks him if it's legal for a builder to cancel and what the consequences are after buyers pay their deposits. How might Matthew respond to Lydia's questions on condo cancellations? Thank you for your input. Matthew must explain to Lydia that condo cancellations, like delays, are a real possibility. The unit she buys tomorrow may never be completed. He should also explain that cancellations are permitted if they have been disclosed in the sale documents, typically in an addendum to the APS. This information sets out any early termination conditions that apply to the project that will allow the builder or developer to terminate the APS if a condition is not met. A condo project could be canceled for early termination conditions like not meeting minimum unit sales, failing to secure satisfactory financing for the project, and failing to get required permits and development approvals for the project, such as zoning permits. This is not a complete list of conditions, so Matthew is expected to review the addendum to identify any others. Matthew is also expected to tell Lydia that if the builder cancels a project under these conditions, Tarion may protect up to $20,000 of her deposit. For this coverage, she must qualify under Tarion's deposit plan. The project must be developed by a registered builder, and she must file a claim with Tarion for the return of her deposit. Often, a deposit for a condo unit is substantially more than $20,000. So what happens to the rest of the deposit? Click Next to find out. In short, if there is a permitted early cancellation, the outcome of any amount of the buyer's deposit over the $20,000 covered by Tarion depends on the terms of the builder's solicitor's trust account. When buying a pre-construction condo unit, the Condo Act requires all buyer deposits to be held in a trust account, to the buyer's benefit, by the builder's solicitor. The builder's solicitor must issue the buyer a specific form that confirms when the deposit was placed in trust and the bank account number where the money is held. This money must be held until the buyer obtains title to the unit, and the money is then paid to the builder or to the buyer if the APS is terminated. If the APS is terminated, other than by breach of contract by the buyer, all money held in trust must be returned to the buyer. Bear in mind that the timing for the buyer to receive their deposit back may vary. Matthew reminds Lydia that the addendum to the APS will contain the early termination conditions that allow the builder to cancel the project. He highlights that cancellations and the return of the deposit are some of the limitations of buying a pre-construction condo unit. Unfortunately, if there is a cancellation, the buyer's deposit may be tied up for some time, and they may miss out on opportunities to purchase another property. Lydia asks about cancellations for reasons other than the agreed early termination conditions, such as builder bankruptcy. She wonders if that changes things. Matthew explains to her that when there is a cancellation due to builder bankruptcy, the outcome could differ, and the buyer's deposit may be at risk. In cases of bankruptcy, a trustee will take over and dispose of the assets to recover funds and compensate creditors. This is a long process that can be initiated by the builder or by one of their creditors. Once the process starts, it triggers a line of creditor applications who submit their debt claims. At some point, a court process begins where the court appoints a trustee and the first creditor meeting takes place. The condo corporation may be placed into receivership if the parties signal that they are willing to come to a resolution. None of this is a quick process. For example, a first meeting of creditors could take place 6 months after the bankruptcy commenced. The buyer's agreements may or may not be honored fully, depending on the circumstances. In some cases, the APS might be voided and the site sold to another party to cover funds owed to the creditors. What this means is that a builder's bankruptcy can be very risky for the buyer because the buyer's deposit could be tied up for years pending resolution in the courts. In the end, buyers may only recover a portion of their deposit after a long wait. And again, the buyer may miss out on other opportunities to buy property elsewhere. Matthew shares that if a builder cancels a project under the addendum to the APS under one of the early termination conditions, Tarion does not impose a fine or other penalty on the builder. However, if a builder cancels a project for a reason other than an agreed early termination condition, such as bankruptcy, then Tarion would investigate and can issue certain sanctions. This may include imposing terms and conditions on a builder's registration and issuing a notice of proposal to revoke their registration. Matthew tells Lydia that, like delays, cancellations are a real possibility, and it's important to research a builder's history to assess their experience developing condo projects. You can research a builder's history by visiting the Tarion website. Click on Builder Directory and search for the builder. First, confirm that they are registered with Tarion. Review the chargeable conciliations, which is when Tarion proceeds against a builder to fulfill their warranty obligations to get an idea of the builder's historical performance. Refer to the course resources for the link to the Tarion website. Matthew researches the builder's history on the Tarion website, confers with some colleagues in his brokerage, and is satisfied with the builder's stability and level of experience. He also takes Lydia to visit a unit for sale in a condo community built by the same builder in charge of the Acorn condos. He was also able to track down an original purchaser of one of the builder's projects who spoke to him and Lydia about his buying experience and the realities of condo ownership. This gives Lydia an idea of what to expect in the project and gives her a sense of the builder's style and approach. Satisfied with the visit, they then head to the Acorn Sales Center together. Before going in, he points out that while the builder is accountable to Tarion, their sales staff may not be registered or licensed by any regulatory body. Unlike Matthew, they may not need to abide by a code of ethics, so it is particularly important that Lydia takes steps to protect her interests. Matthew comes prepared with questions for the builder to gauge their past experience, further demonstrating to Lydia the benefit of working with a real estate salesperson. Lydia refers to the documents that the builder provided and tells Matthew which floor plan she is most interested in. What advice might Matthew provide to Lydia about the floor plans? Thank you for your input. Matthew must explain to Lydia that the drawings are for marketing purposes and the floor plan she is looking at is subject to change. The square footage of the pre-construction condo she purchases is normally a one-page inclusion to the APS. Matthew must carefully study the floor plan and ask the builder how they measure square footage. He must also review the APS carefully to let Lydia know what constitutes the interior and the exterior. The total square footage and the interior-exterior distribution might differ once the unit is built. Lydia has to know this because square footage is part of a lender's considerations for mortgage approvals. Unlike the builder, a lender may not consider outdoor spaces such as a balcony or patio to be part of the total square footage of the unit. This means that buyers like Lydia may not be able to secure financing for units that are below a certain square footage as per the lender's standards. He must also carefully explain the potential for material changes. Matthew explains to Lydia that floor plans are subject to change and the unit might be a different size or have a different layout once built. Matthew also explains what qualifies as a material change. Material changes are defined by the Condo Act as any changes that a reasonable person would consider important enough that they would not have gone through with the transaction if they had known about these changes before committing to an APS. We cannot overemphasize the importance of reviewing the documentation provided by the builder or developer around material changes permitted on a pre-construction condo project, either before signing the APS or during the 10-day cooling-off period. Refer to the course resources to view the section of the Condo Act that defines material changes. few days later, Matthew phones Lydia to discuss next steps. Review their conversation. Click the arrows to toggle between scenes, then click Next to continue. Matthew also explains to Lydia that the documentation for pre-construction condos is different than the documentation for resale condos. He refers to the Terrion Statement of Critical Dates, which is a unique document required for most pre-construction deals. He walks her through the Schedule B addendum, which specifies additional charges, fees, and adjustments that might happen on pre-construction deals. He advises Lydia that her lawyer must review the documentation and take other steps to protect her interests. For example, they can negotiate to cap adjustments that may be charged upon closing. Matthew was able to successfully navigate Lydia's questions, advise her on her decisions to purchase pre-construction, and explain how financing would work on a pre-construction deal. If he wasn't experienced with pre-construction condos, he should consider working cooperatively with another, more experienced real estate representative. In this unit, you followed Matthew as he worked with Lydia on a pre-construction condo purchase. Now you will be able to identify key steps when preparing a client to purchase a pre-construction condo, recognize your responsibilities when advising on cancellations or pre-construction condos, and recognize limitations in your expertise. Click Exit to close this unit and proceed to the next topic of the update course.